Today I'm going to do 5 projects using these scraps along with some cheap materials that you can easily buy in your local hardware stores and bookstores near you. Project number 1, I started by cutting 8 pieces of about 1 to 2 inches wide of strips from this old shirt that I have. Now, don't worry too much if the cut is not so straight. It really doesn't have to be, so there's no need to stress about that. Cut one end of each strips. Then you're going to stretch out all the pieces so that the sides will curl up towards each other and you'll end up having a more polished look for each of your strips. Grab all 8 pieces of strips and do a simple knot on one side like so. And then you're gonna need to leave a few inches of strip at the end of the knot for the tassel effect. Next step is to group your strips into 4 sets and then knot each set 2 inches from the top knot. Once all the sets are tied, do this process once again for the second row, creating 2 new pairs. You can make as much rows as you want. I opted for 3 because I think it'll look best for the size of the pot I'm working with. Place your potted plant in the middle and then grab all the strips upward. Loop the 8 strips of cloth through your metal hoop, then proceed by doing a simple knot. Grab another strip, then begin wrapping around all the other strips, and then tuck the excess fabric to finish, and you're ready to hang. For this second project, I'm going to mix these 3 styles of wall art for a maximum texture. Let's start with a textured painting. Scoop a fair amount of wall putty using the putty knife and then press it down your canvas. You can go any directions you want, but I did stick to the up going down motion to give it a more cohesive look. Really quite excited to remake this one because I've been seeing a lot of this abstract wall art over at Pinterest, and art, as you know, it can be on the pricey side, right? So I think this is a good way to have that art without the hefty price tag. Once everything is covered, you can go ahead and let it dry. Meanwhile, let's go retro with a string art. Secure your printed out pattern using a tape onto your wood block. This will serve as your guide to where your nails will go. There, now let's get nailing. Once you're done nailing, rip out the pattern and then you can start stringing. Tie your yarn at your starting point. I suggest to tie it twice to make sure it's nice and tight. From then on, you're just going to weave in a back and forth motion like so. Don't worry too much about where your string goes because you can always unwind and do it again. Once you're at your last nail, you're going to tie your yarn once more and then cut the excess. I decided to add brown yarn to overlap with the green yarn just to give it a little more depth. And you're done. For this last wall art, we are going to make a framed continuous geometric picture. First things first, you have to tape down the edge of your paper together so that it'll be easier to mark down your pattern. Don't forget to flip your paper before you start marking. I began outlining with a pencil first because with geometric patterns, you always want to keep your lines as straight as possible. Especially with pattern I chose, it's quite minimal, so it's important to keep it clean and crisp. To finish, you just need to go over the outline you've made, but this time with a marker. Once you're done, cut it in the middle, frame both your paper, and you're good to go. Project number 3 is another macrame piece. Prepare your yarn first by measuring the window where your curtain is going to hang. Then cut a length of yarn twice as long as the measurement of your window. I ended up cutting 24 yarn strands because I decided to do a set of 12 yarns since the crochet yarn isn't as thick as the macrame yarn. Thread the yarn onto the curtain rod like so. And then leaving the outer set of yarns from both ends, you're going to pair 2 neighboring yarns and then tie them together. It's very repetitive, so it's quite easy to do. Just keep in mind to leave a set of yarn at the outer layer of every rows of knot. Once you're done, wrap a little bit of air dry clay to each of the knots and then form it into a bead. Don't worry too much if it isn't too round. I actually think it'll look more interesting and rustic if the clay beads aren't as uniform. I also added clay beads at the ends of each sets of yarn to add more weight. Here's a closer look. So I like to knead my clay with my fingers first to soften it up and make it easier to work with. Again, it doesn't have to be a perfect circle, it just has to cover the entire knot. And your curtain is ready. Project number 4 is a good way to recycle some old toy and to make a rather boring bookends into a display-worthy decor. The first thing to do is to nail down together 2 wood blocks into an L shape, like this. You're gonna do 2 of these. Then fill in the holes and cracks with your wood filler. You can use a putty knife, or in my case, I use my fingers to really get into those corners. Wipe off any excess and let them dry. Here I have the old rubber toy pre-cut in the middle. Now all you have to do is to mark down where you want it placed, and then using a hot glue, follow the mark, then stick the toy carefully. Do the same on the other half. And we're ready to paint. Spray a good amount on all sides, but be sure to let it dry before going over the other sides. With the same process, I also made this. I didn't have to use nails for this though, and instead of an old toy, I used cardboard letters. Project number 5, and I'm calling this a stuff holder just because it's very multifunctional, and I really don't think it's right to just call it pencil holder. First is to draw your pattern or design, and I'm going for another geometric pattern here. So same thing as before, outline with a pencil first and then use a marker afterwards. You can also print out a design if you want to save time. Next is to stick your pattern onto the can using an adhesive tape. Cut any excess. Then with an electrical tape, wrap the upper and lower portion. This is to cover any sharp edges on your can, and it'll also serve as the outline of your design. Lastly, using a glue gun, stick your jute rope to the top portion of your holder. This will give a more finished look to your piece. And that sums up our elegant, budget-friendly DIY room decor. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you were able to pick up some helpful tips and tricks. Till next time, bye!